Welcome back into another MLS Six Pack with me, Jessica Charman, and my buddy, Jason Longshore. It's the show where we bring you the six biggest topics, and we use biggest very variantly because they're not always the hottest topics, but they're the six we want to talk about. But first, Jason, I've got to talk to you about how your week's been going. How are you feeling? Because as we go to record this, obviously we may release it after the fact the US men's national team's about to play. Let's talk to future Jason. How are you feeling?
Little nervous because it's a big night for the program. I'm sure people listening to this, although some might catch it before the game goes, are going to be, knowing exactly what's going on and either laughing either way, I guess, because I'm nervous, like across the board, just because it's a big, big night for the program. And if they win, then it's an epic win and it should be celebrated. And I'm sure people will have excuses if they win about why. And no, it's not that big of a deal. It is a big deal if they pull that off. And if they don't, and they're not expected to, although some of the bookmakers' odds have been really confusing for this game. If they don't, then I think they have to consider changes. And then that opens up a whole nother Pandora's box of chaos and intrigue and rumor and innuendo and all of it, because I don't know if it's an absolute guarantee that they do make a change. I think they have to talk about it internally. And do they? I don't know. I think if it's a loss tonight and they're out of the tournament, there is so much unknown starting tomorrow for U.S. soccer that it's going to be interesting to watch, but it's going to be very nerve-wracking.
Well, the good news is you can listen to Jason Longshore's thoughts on Atlanta Soccer tonight. I often join him on there to break things down, and we'll also be all across the Soccer Down Here network chatting soccer all summer long. You talked about teams potentially making a change. One team that did make a change, and we're going to open our first can of the six pack, is St. Louis. Bradley Carnell finds the axe with his removal after a poor start to 2024, but he did lead the team to a first-place finish in the West in 2023. Sporting director Lutz talks about how the Year 2 results to date just weren't good enough, with St. Louis currently sitting all the way down in 12th with a 3-7-10 record. But Jason, we've talked about managers already on this podcast getting a little bit of leeway when they do a lot historically for the club. Do you think this is a little too soon for Bradley Carnell, considering what he did for St. Louis in 2023?
Yeah, I do, because I don't know if there's a guarantee that you get better by making this change right now, and it feels a little unfair because Bradley Carnell hasn't had a lot of time with the club. I mean, a year and a half. He was a finalist for MLS Coach of the Year last year. He won the Western Conference last year with a roster that no one expected to win the Western Conference. That's a pretty good coaching job. Did they get some good fortune, especially early in the season? Yeah, they did. Did they maybe catch people by surprise early in the year? Yeah, they did. But he had a hand in that. And I think it's unfair to put most everything on him in the press conference that was held afterwards. It's kind of confusing because at one point, Lutz Pfannenstiel, the sporting director, said that if the team had won Saturday night, then Bradley would still be the coach today. And right before that, it was said that, well, this is over a longer period of time, right before and right after that statement. Well, this is not just, a short-term period of results. This is over a longer period of time of assessment. And I mean, frankly, I'm confused. And then the other part, and I think this is where things get interesting. Pfannenstiel was asked about the style of play. And St. Louis is a very rigid team stylistically, at least what we've seen of them. Now, you can be a high-intensity pressing team, as Pfannenstiel described it, and do that different ways. The way that they were doing it felt outdated. It felt like Red Bulls from a few years ago. But
hey, tune into our last week's episode for a breakdown on that, right? I believe it was can number 6, where we took a deep dive into the development of pressing style. I just thought that we might give that a re-hit because that would be very relevant to this conversation.
Yeah, I think the big difference, I mean, one, the stylistic part of it, but two, the Red Bulls invested in some guys who can play. Emil Forsberg makes that team completely different. St. Louis doesn't have a player like that. And look, they've had some injuries. A lot of teams have had injuries. They've had some guys lose form. A lot of guys have a lot of teams have had guys in poor form at different points. There's some kind of an issue between Sam Adeniran and Bradley Carnell. He was not training. Now he is training. Does that factor into it? Potentially. But to say that we're going to stick with the same identity and just leave it there, and to say that he would have kept the job if he had kept the result on Saturday night. I don't know if things are set up for success in St. Louis, and I'll end on this point, because if you know American soccer history and St. Louis, it is a former absolute hotbed for developing American players. It can be again. There's great youth clubs in that area, and they have a great, rich history in developing very talented players. I have always had a concern that the style of play, which does not value talented players on the ball in the same way as some other clubs might, I've always wondered if that would be an issue in St. Louis if the results are not very, very, very good. It's too early to tell. The new car smell is still there, but that's something that I think will end up being an issue. And I think over time, and probably when either Lutz Pfannenstiel is let go or moves on of his own volition, I think St. Louis will go to a different style to tap into the young, exciting players that they can develop that are, frankly, going to be more valued for what they do on the ball than what they do off of it.
And which we should give ourselves a little plug here, because we did have an opportunity to call the St. Louis Academy in the UPSL
And
a
they were
year
very
ago.
good.
And they were brilliant. And it was interesting because we talked about the style of play, and they were far more of that modernized pressing play where they
Mhm.
still had the technical ability. And I'll go back to what I called it on last week's episode, that hybrid that we're seeing develop more, where you can be direct, you can be high intensity, but you still are comfortable on the ball. And I think that St. Louis's academy, if that's anything to go by, if they're able to get those players ready for the next stages, the product on the field at the first team is going to have to advance as well for those players to thrive.
I know we were frozen calling that game back in January, so it might be a little
It was
hard to
only
remember.
January. Oh my, that feels like a year ago.
I know. It
Goodness.
was it was January, and it was so cold that my phone would not start charging when I plugged it in when I got to the car because it said it was too cold.
We had
But
icicles on our toes. That
yes.
was one of those where I thought to myself, I love calling games, but I need to have my limits.
But here's the thing, and I remember us talking about this. We were so pleasantly surprised at having seen St. Louis's first team play in 2023 and seeing this academy
Mm-hmm.
team in UPSL play and say, "Oh, okay, this is good soccer. This is really nice." And they were intense and they were pressing, but they were also very talented on the ball and valued having the ball. So they can do it. And I think they need to do more of it, because how many pure pressing teams that play in the way that St. Louis has played up to now have won an MLS Cup title? Answer is zero. It's very hard when you get into the playoffs, and this is a playoff driven league. It's very hard when teams say, you know what, this is a knockout game. Our season's on the line. I know we have some identity of our own, but you guys can't play with the ball here. Have it. Do what you're going to do. Let's see what happens. And it's
Mm-hmm.
happened to teams over and over and over again in the postseason. So I think St. Louis has to make some bigger considerations about what they do. I do think Bradley Carnell is kind of the scapegoat here for bigger issues. He'll end up somewhere else. He's got to modernize, I think, the way that he wants to play a little bit more. But St. Louis surprised everybody with this move, but I don't think it actually fixes very much. So let's move on. A big, big game this week in Los Angeles at the Rose Bowl. It's El Trafico. First off, do you like the name El Trafico, Jess?
It's catchy, isn't it? Which I guess is what a name has to be. Is it correct in Espanol? No, but it is what it is, right? It's not our rivalry. We've still got to focus on that one come August, Jason, on what
Mhm.
we're calling the Jessica Charman I-85 derby.
Yeah, as long as we come up with something better than El Trafico. I've given up fighting it, though. It's a huge game on Thursday night on July 4th, 10:30 Eastern kick. There's going to be a gigantic crowd, and it's the top two teams in the West, in the LA Galaxy and LAFC. Both come in after wins. Are these the two best teams in MLS in your mind in 2024?
Oh, it's a tough one because I think that the Eastern Conference sometimes has more difficult battles. I feel like from head to toe, the Eastern Conference is closer together, which means that some of those matchups are more difficult. Obviously, you get the cross rivalry ones as well. I love the fact that the two of them are so good, though, because it plays into that rivalry far more. It plays into that derby day. I mean, in recent seasons, LA Galaxy have just been hot garbage, haven't they? And it just hasn't been any sort of pressure for LAFC. The games have always been interesting, but in terms of the standings, it hasn't had the same impact. So to see these teams come into it 1 and 2 on 40 points each, obviously LAFC have that game in hand, but that's really, really exciting. And it just puts more sort of sizzle into this derby because it means so much to both teams to get that advantage.
Sometimes the order of the show falls into place for a reason. This was not intentional, but talking about St. Louis and then making the change on head coach today after a year and a half, Greg Vanney, a lot of people wanted him run out of town in Los Angeles. And isn't it crazy when you give him some talent to work with, what happens? Gabriel Peck, Joseph Paintsil, both maybe should be in the all-star team. I know we're going to talk about that a little bit. But those two guys have made everything work for this Galaxy team. And Ricky Pooch is a great playmaker who has weapons to actually play in behind.
And don't forget moving on from golden generation older players. I mean, Chicharito, you get rid of Chicharito and not trying to be nasty to the guy. I think he's a legendary player, but freeing yourself of somebody that's a big name. Portugal might want to consider doing similar, by the way, after that Euro performance. Is that too soon to make that comment?
No, that's way overdue.
But in all seriousness, like sometimes you can hold on to dead weight because it's a franchise name, because it's a name that's associated with success and it can hold you back. I mean, look at Chicago Fire without Shaqiri. It's little things like that. Sometimes you need to remove a player that so much focuses on and bring in some different, more exciting players. And I mean, Ricky Pooch has just been brilliant, and he pulls the strings on that side and just drops everywhere on the pitch. And he's a player that LAFC will really have to try and minimize the impact he's able to have.
LAFC is tied 40 points with the Galaxy. Mateusz Bogusz may be the MVP candidate that isn't being talked about enough, and also not on the all-star team. And they're about to get Olivier Giroud. So, I mean, this is a very, very talented LAFC team, a very, very talented LA Galaxy team. And in my travels this week, I should get to Salt Lake City in plenty of time to sit down on July 4th, probably some fireworks going off somewhere in downtown Salt Lake City, and watch El Trafico.
Hopefully there'll be actual fireworks in the game as well, because it's always fun when these matches are heated up. We'll see how that one goes. Maybe it'll be a 0-0 draw just to rub salt into your wounds, Jason Longshore.
I hope not. I'll need more than a six-pack if that's the case.
Well, we'll get on to our third pack of the day. So 3 would be plenty, I think, for me at least. We're going to talk about the state of the Seattle Sounders. Now, they are coming off a good result with a win over Chicago, but there seems to be a lot of mess in the locker room. Sounders forward Raul Ruidiaz and defender Nuhu were both banned from training with the team this week and will not play on Saturday. Coach Brian Schmetzer said Wednesday last week he classified the action as a coach's decision. This is starting to become a bit more common, though, isn't it? Coaches coming out and talking about players not being able to play, not being selected, training down with academies, those kind of things. I mean, this season we've already seen Cucho Gate with the Columbus Crew. We also had last season with Charlotte FC when they played Columbus being told that Darlington knows what he did when Darlington Nagbe was not allowed to play. So these are becoming increasingly common, would you say?
Yeah, look, it's one thing when, okay, that happened in the middle of Columbus's season last year, and they went on and won the title. This year, they're very, very good again, and they're having those issues. And I think there is a difference here to a degree in that in Columbus, Darlington knows what he did, but we don't know what he did, and that's fine. You know, I mean, we don't have to know what he did.
We still want to know a little bit. Come on, the curiosity in
I'm
us.
curious, yes, but I think it's a credit to Wilfried Nancy and that club and that locker room that it isn't out there about
You don't
whatever
need to
happened.
air the dirty laundry, right? Airing the dirty laundry is just creating toxicity and a lack of trust in your dressing room.
It definitely can. I do think Christian Roldan, who spoke to the media, was maybe trying to clarify a little bit more rather than air dirty laundry. Although, you know, some of the things that Christian Roldan and you're talking about, you know, two guys in Rui Diaz and Roldan who've been there for a long time, knew who's been there for a little bit shorter time. You're talking about big leaders in this team, but Roldan saying that, you know, Rui Diaz has every right to be upset because he wants to play more. Well, his performances and injuries and different things have kind of made it harder to play him as much. And I think Brian Schmetzer is stuck in a very difficult spot. Nuhu has had some disciplinary issues before. I think it sounds like he's maybe the lesser of the two in the situation. Whenever this kind of stuff starts to get talked about publicly, I think you have to be on edge about what's the next action. Because it's rare that what is happened in Columbus is the outcome. It's rare that we don't find out what Darlington did. We don't find out exactly
Sorry,
what happened with
Darlington.
Cucho. Yeah, no offense to Darlington. He's a great guy. It's just it was the line that has stuck. You know, we didn't really get a whole lot of detail about what happened with Cucho. It sounds like he got into it with an assistant after a substitution, and they've moved on. And I think the less that got out says that it was easier to move on in a way. In Seattle, with now things being out there a little bit more, they got that win, which was huge, because if you're not winning and this kind of stuff is simmering off in the background, it can be a huge issue. And even for somebody like Brian Schmetzer, who I think is probably one of the best in the league at managing a locker room, at managing situations, at dealing with egos, dealing with everything. Seems like a pretty unflappable guy. When he has to come out and talk about this stuff and try to explain it without throwing guys under the bus, and then stuff comes out anyway to some extent, it's an issue. And if they don't keep winning, it's going to be an issue that could really affect the rest of their season, in my opinion. What do you think?
Now, Stephen Fry and Jordan Morris, two experienced players, big names within the franchise, have come out and publicly said the team is close-knit. Obviously, that's what you do say in a leadership role. We don't know 100% how true that is. I think, though, that right now, you're right. The results are what's really key. If you're having issues in the chemistry, issues in the relationships, if you're losing the locker room, as they always like to say, between the coach and the locker room, even if it's just a small divide within the locker room, and you're having bad results, that's when you become a problematic place. Seattle's still in very decent form at the moment, even with the issues that they have going on.
We'll see if they can keep it together, but keep an eye on what's going on in Seattle. Another one to keep an eye on as we move to number 4 in the six pack, Duncan McGuire. And this has been a really weird situation. I don't know what
long
it is.
Game. Duncan McGuire is playing long game right now. This has been going on a long time.
Yeah, but it's shifted around. I don't know what it is with us in weird situations in this week's six pack, St. Louis and now Seattle and this one, because Duncan McGuire was gone. He was gone to Blackburn.
He was on a plane. He was literally on the plane.
He's there. And Blackburn can't do the job correctly, and the admin screws it up, and the transfer doesn't get approved. I really do think the Football League or the FA, I can't remember who said no at the last on the appeal.
Oh, it's a hot mess over
they
there.
Should have let it go. I mean, yes. It was obvious
human nature of it. Again, weird comparison, but it goes down to the soccer IQ of referees. Like, you've just got to have more soccer IQ. Know the game. Understand that this wasn't someone playing with an agent. This wasn't someone bait. It was literally a typo. Like, someone forgot the date or had a typo with the date. It was something that was human error. Use your common sense at that point.
let it happen so you don't get into what's going on now, where he has to go back to Orlando. Orlando had already brought in Luis Muriel, and then you're having to figure out, okay, we've got two guys now in the same position, and Muriel's played as a 10, he's played as a winger, and Orlando's not really doing that great this season because of this stuff. It's got to be a bit of a distraction. So he comes back, and then Orlando says, well, hi, good to see you again. Let's sign you to a new contract.
Let's
And he's
lock
like,
you in.
and he's like, no, I don't want to sign a new contract. So he's under contract with club options for 25 and 26. And now it's in the media about the club wants to sign him to a new one. He doesn't want to sign to a new one. And he wants to go back to Europe, and Orlando doesn't want to sell him. How do you resolve this at this point after what happened in the last window?
Yeah, there's trust issues going in right now as well, right? Like 100%. It's one of those where you're nervous, you're worried about it. I don't blame Duncan McGuire
I
from
don't either.
wanting to make the move, particularly now he's had the sniff of it, right? Like once you know they're interested overseas, you're a young player, you've got your head screwed on, you want to make that jump towards Europe. And he said that very clearly, that his focus is on Europe, and the Olympics is coming up this summer too, with an opportunity potentially. I don't want him to end up in a poor middle of the road Championship League One team, though, which we've seen happen. I still feel a little salty about the fact that Aidan Morris is going to Middlesbrough.
You are not happy about that move.
Maybe I'm jealous that Reading can't sign anybody for money, so I'm seeing it. But I'm a big MLS advocate, and I know that the championship has the potential to be a premier. You know, if you're a championship team, the promotion means that you have a chance. But we see players go into these leagues and struggle because they're not used to the relegation battle. They're not used to the style of the championship. And sometimes I think players jump ship a little too quickly. And I'm not 100% sure Duncan McGuire thrives in Europe. We shall see. But for him and Orlando right now, they've got to come up with a decision. I think Orlando City is being a little bit dumb, to put it bluntly.
No,
that
I
they're
agree.
thinking that now is the right time to approach and sign a new deal. Like you can't block his move. You've already been part of the mess up. This just feels very disrespectful to a player, and it's not going to set the tone. You know, players talk. And if you hear that the front office treats a player this way, it can feed into the negativity surrounding the club as well.
Yeah, I agree. You're not going to be able to play that okey doke of, okay, we're going to sell you. Thank you for everything. We really appreciate it. Great deal for the club. Good luck to you. Bye. And then, oh, hi, you're back. We were going to sell you, but now we don't want to sell you at all, and we want to keep you long term. No, that's not how any of this works. So you've got to move on. They should have, even after the Blackburn screw up, they should have found a loan to another club where the window was still open. And they did have a few options. They didn't have a ton. They should have loaned him somewhere for 6 months, moved on thoroughly, and told him, look, we're going to loan you for 6 months. So you're going to be somewhere else. You're going to train and play, and we're going to try to get you the best situation out of option A, B, or C. And then we're going to sell you in the summer. And they're not doing that. And it's not going to help anything by trying to drag this out at this point. Get the best deal for the player, move on. That's what you have to do in this situation.
Well, there's question marks whether Duncan McGuire is going to be a star or not. I do wish him the best, by the way. I'm not a complete hater. I'm just nervous about what championship club he may arrive at. But a team that is going to be made up of stars is the MLS All-Star team. And today it was announced who would be on Wilfried Nancy's roster. And there was a little bit of underwhelming responses. And I will put on, I'm ready to put on my blue tinted glasses right now, and I will announce it. Anybody who doesn't know who I am a radio broadcaster for Charlotte FC, so maybe a little bit biased here, but for the third straight season, Charlotte FC does not have an MLS All-Star. Now, year 1 and 2, with how things were going, with how they were playing, I get it. But when you have 9 clean sheets, when you have the best defensive record in the league, and your goalkeeper can't make the roster, or your center back, who, by the way, is one of the most exciting products right now in the league, in Adilson Miranda, can't make the call up either, you can understand why people in Charlotte colors are a little bit disappointed. Don't forget, 12 players are a combination of the vote from fan, media, and players. 16 are selected by Wilfried Nancy, because the game is in Columbus Crew. He'll be the coach. And 2 are selected by MLS Commissioner Don Garber. What are your thoughts of this?
I was entertained today by Charlotte's social media responses to the All-Star team
I
coming out.
believe my colleague Willie P called it criminal 4 times. I mean, I'm hoping there will be no charge. I'm hoping there will be no charges pressed.
I don't think he will get fined. I've said plenty of things over the years and haven't been fined yet, so I think he's okay in that side of things. I was interested by the club's tweets about it because I think we're getting to a point where when you have the number of teams that you do, you're going to have a lot of teams that don't have an all-star. Now, I want to get into the team a little bit and say where I feel like there's some people there maybe shouldn't be. One caveat that I will throw out there is the coaches' selections are always very interesting, and they're not always the obvious picks. And one reason why in this game, as opposed to an East versus West All-Star game, which is more about fun, more about, okay, well, we've got, 20 great number 10s in the league. We're not going to pick any defensive midfielders. Let's just go and have some fun. The game will be 10-8. This is a competitive game against
Liga MX, which is such a big deal because we've already seen the Leagues Cup and we know it's a pride thing, right? It's about the bragging rights.
Yeah, we've seen this game a couple of times and it's been good. I think it's the best format for an all-star game in the United States. It's better than any other all-star game in any other league. I don't care about their history. Those games so often
we don't need Chelsea to come.
Fun.
We don't need Tottenham to come. Give us Liga MX. Like, there's more bad blood there, and it's good
because
it's not just someone treating it as a preseason friendly.
It's a game. It's not about playing an existing club that, even if it's a preseason friendly, those guys play together. This team does not. But in a game like this where there's some bragging rights, the coach is going to pick guys that he knows and trusts. And he did. And I don't disagree with all of his selections. He definitely went heavy on guys that he knows, and that's his prerogative. I don't disagree with many of them. There are a few that I disagree with, and it's not the Columbus guys, actually. Goalkeeper, if Charlotte has the biggest case for an all-star, it's Kalina, in my opinion. And Roman Berkey should not be on this team. And Roman Berkey was a great goalkeeper last season. Roman Berkey is a very talented goalkeeper. Roman Berkey's manager got fired today because they're not doing very well. And it's not on Roman Berkey, but come on, how can he be?
Okay. Let me say something, because this is honestly the truth, because I experienced it during my career too. It's part of it. Even if you are standing in your head as a goalkeeper and making big saves, if your defense is struggling and you let in a lot of goals, you're not going to win any awards, or you shouldn't. You're not going to see the goalkeeper picked for all conference that has picked the ball out the back of the net 60 times, even if they've made 200 saves, because it's the nature of the goals against. And so I'm saying here, Roman Berkey's done some bloody good saves. Like, he's a good goalkeeper still. But you cannot pick someone whose defense has conceded, and they've picked out the back of the net, more goals than many other goalkeepers. Like, that just doesn't add up to an all-star selection. He can still be a good goalkeeper, but his statistics, if we're going to lean on statistics in this, are not all-star level.
They've won 3 games. Like, you can't pick him. I'm sorry. Hugo Lloris has been fine on a really good team. That one makes
apart from
sense.
Hating the snow, right? Didn't he nearly cry on the snow game?
I think he did. I forgot about that one. That's a good one. Berkey shouldn't be there. He got there because of last year. That should be Kalina. I think center back's a little bit more of a challenging one, and it is somewhat down to the Columbus guys, because Camacho and Moreira both get in, and we know Steven Moreira is not a traditional center back, and I'll be curious to see if Wilfred Nancy plays the kind of shape that he likes to play with Columbus with this team, because I'm very interested to see how he coaches his team. I'll be intrigued. The one that I think could probably have been left out was Thiago Martins. I think Malanda could have had a shout there. I think a few other center backs could have had a shout there as well. there's a couple. I mentioned Bogusz earlier. Bogusz, he should be in there, and it was before he had a hat trick over the weekend. Like, Bogusz should be in this team, although the attackers, if you look at the forwards and the wingers and the attacking midfielders, there's a ton of talent.
Yep.
Hani Mukhtar is the one that should not be in the All-Star team.
Which is so crazy. You would have never thought that based on his previous seasons, but he just hasn't been good this year.
The team hasn't been good. He hasn't been good. Andres Gomez of RSL, nobody's talking about. He's got 10 goals and 7 assists.
It's a name thing, though, isn't it? It's
is.
A name thing. Look through this roster and how much of it is about household name. I mean, that would stand with Roman Berkey too, right? If you're voting, and I'm not being a snob here on my high horse, but if you don't necessarily pay attention to too many of the teams because you only focus on your one team, if you're looking through, you're going to pick names. You're going to pick the Hugo Llorises. You're going to pick the Lionel Messis. And that's not to say that Messi doesn't deserve it. Of course he does.
Yeah, he was voted in too. So
you get it. It's household names that you're going to pick for.
The coaches' selections are interesting, and I think he got a lot of them right on the attacking side. I'm not a fan of Martins. I'm definitely not a fan of Berkey being in this team. But he, in terms of coaches' selections, he took Mathieu Chouanier.
Well, I was just looking at his name. I was like, I like that. That's good.
I love Mathieu Chouanier's game. He's one of my favorite players in the league, and I'm very happy that he's there. And he's worked with him before. Evander absolutely deserves it from Portland. He's been great. Gauld has been great for Vancouver. Robin Lod has been great for Minnesota with his assists. Those are all coaches' selections. Mukhtar, big problem with. Bernardeschi, I get it. He's been really good. Boanga has to be there. He should have been voted in probably. Cucho, no problem with him being chosen. Diego Rossi, maybe a little borderline. Maybe you could have went Bogusz there or went somewhere else. The other position that I feel like they got wrong is fullback. Now, again, you do have to keep in mind that if Wilfred Nancy's going to play with his 3 center backs where they might not actually be true center backs, and then fullback / winger / central midfielders playing wing back, then it changes the paradigm a little bit. But a guy that I know he's a little polarizing, but Kai Wagner is probably the best fullback in the league this season, and he's not in this team. Brooks Lennon is one of the league leaders in assists from a fullback position and one of the league leaders in what he's created. He's not in, and that's fine. Keegan Rosenberry, I don't think he should be there. I do really like Aaron Herrera being in this team because on a DC team that hasn't always been great, I think Herrera has been really good this year. Orejano has been very good. But Wagner, Kalina, Bogusz are probably the 3 that I feel are the big.
Is this the first year Atlanta United hasn't had an all-star? Feels like they've always had one.
Might be. Yeah, because Thiago was there last year.
Martinez,
Yeah, it might be, and I think the team's probably very, very happy about it.
I would assume Miguel Almiron was one back in the day. Yeah, exactly. If there's one silver lining, you don't have to worry about players getting hurt, and you also don't have to watch them embarrass themselves in the MLS skill competition, which I watch far more admirably than the actual game. I love the skills competition.
I love the skills competition. Thiago was really good in that last year. That was a lot of fun. The fact for Atlanta, and I can't remember Charlotte's Leagues Cup schedule, Atlanta plays their Leagues Cup game against DC 2 days after the All-Star game.
Yep. So don't stay at home.
They're
boys.
fine.
Stay at home.
Brooks would have been great. I think he is someone who has said he wants it. He wants to be recognized like that because I think he feels disrespected nationally. And it is ridiculous. He is one of the best fullbacks in the league. No question about it. And he does not get enough attention. But from an Atlanta United club perspective, it's probably very good that he's not going to this one.
So MLS All-Star match will be on July 24th, and the skills competition usually takes place the day before. And I heard rumblings there may be goalie wars. So keeping my fingers crossed that goalie wars will make an admirable return, and I can train up an All-Star. I am 1 for 1 in my coaching of goalkeeping All-Stars.
You are. And I might need another six pack for the skills challenge, but we've got one more left in this six pack. And I got to ask you, because I feel like everybody's been talking about this, not even just in this league, but all over the world. Jamal Thiaré's goal for Atlanta to beat Toronto in pretty much the last play of the match, the old sneak attack. It's very hard to pull off. It's something that we talked about. We've seen. I've never seen it to decide a game in stoppage time that deep from a goalkeeper's perspective. You need to talk about this one and the good and the bad of it.
Yeah. Firstly, I've not seen it for a very long time because I feel like all goalkeepers of my generation grew up watching David Seaman's goalkeeping nightmares and had it drilled into their heads that they should always check their shoulders. Or
Was
maybe
this a
that was just my
bedtime
dad.
ritual?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I had the VCR every night. It was my favorite thing to go to bed to. It actually seems quite like self-deprecating the more I think about it, that I literally went to bed watching goalkeepers let in terrible goals. But I think it was all part of the plan to humble me and to also keep me grounded that, Shay Gibbons let in a bad goal. David Seaman's let in bad goals. It happens to even the greats. But in all seriousness, I've seen it happen, not for many a year, like I say, and most importantly, never in a moment like this. And I think this is what makes it so, so, so much worse for the goalkeeper, because it's literally like the last kick of the game. A lot of the times when you make a mistake like that, or you let a ball in, you have a bad save, even if it's not of that standard, you have the rest of the game to make up for it. You have the rest of the game to make up for it individually by pulling off a big save, by playing really well out of your skin for the rest of the game. And your teammates also have an opportunity to fight for you, right? They have an opportunity to say, hey, Jess has busted her butt all season. This is uncharacteristic. Let's make sure it doesn't define her. I felt really, really, really bad for the young kid in goal because he didn't get that moment. And I've seen pictures of him having to be pretty much carried off the field by his teammates. But you got to check your shoulders. I think from Thiaré, he knows exactly what he's doing. It's part of the game. As an annoying forward, you lurk out, you try and get some opportunities.
As an annoying forward. I love it.
It's I'm not biased. What are we talking about?
Yeah.
What goalkeeper union? But in all but in all seriousness, it'll never happen again. I think every goalkeeper in the league has probably watched it, and they will be reminding themselves daily to check their shoulders. So maybe this was a sacrificial effort from the keeper to make sure that it didn't happen for anybody else this season. But I did love your interview with Brad Guzan and the fact that he showed that he's still an ultimate professional, making sure he spent some time to sort of just explain that this happens in football, but to cost yourself the result. I mean, I understand why Atlanta United's on a high. Love your goal call, by the way, and the fist pumping. I'm glad that you didn't fall out the window. That's for sure. But yeah, tough pill to watch as a goalkeeper. Very tough.
Yeah, Luka Gavrin, I thought, was so good in the match as well. He made a couple of saves that he had no business making. He's somebody who's come up through TFC2, had a chance to see him in Next Pro last year. Just a really impressive young goalkeeper. And obviously, if you've seen the booth cam, pretty excited about the goal ending up in the back of the net and Atlanta winning the match. But as we were talking through it, I was watching him more than anything. And I give a lot of the players around him a ton of credit. A lot of the Toronto players went up to him and were trying to console him. I mean, he was inconsolable. And I get it. I understand it. Other Atlanta players did as well and went up and talked to him. But I watched Brad after his celebrations with his team go find Gavrin. And that interview was part of our full-time report. I shared it on Twitter separately. You can go check that out. It's just Brad's been there and done that, and he gets it. And, GK Union is a real thing. And it was very, very cool. I was not surprised by it because, getting to know Brad over the years here in Atlanta, like I think it's pretty obvious the class that he has as an individual, but it was impressive nonetheless to see him do that. I do want to talk about the TRA aspect of it a little bit because we've seen players try to be sneaky before in various ways in
This was a
games.
full acting. I mean, his agent
Incredible.
needs to put him into acting. I wouldn't be surprised to him as an extra in the next Marvel movie. I mean, Tyler Perry Studios is just down the road because that drinking, the little swig of the water, and then we need the Pink Panther theme tune because there's this slow gander. I mean, he was tippy-toeing to not be heard. You have to, like, here's the thing. I know the Mercedes-Benz Stadium is loud, but when you're locked in, you hear everything, right? Like you hear. So for Thiaré to not be even like breathing heavily, you know what I mean? Like I just, he played into the card. I mean, that's an impressive acting job.
He did it so well. And I think the biggest thing, going back and looking at it, because in the moment, you know how it is. We're talking about the last play. We're breaking it down. The game's almost over. We're thinking about what we're going to say after the result. And I didn't realize in the moment everything he did to pull it off. The drink of water, brilliant. And then to not get too far to either side. Because
you had the peripherals.
Yes.
It's the peripherals. Mm-hmm.
He stayed right behind him and far enough back.
Like in his shadow. Literally, like you have to be right there. And
it was so impressive. And in the timing and then the finish, because Gavrin closes it down pretty quick. Kosi Thompson, who was the only player who tried to do anything about it, he came charging back. It wasn't a completely simple finish, and Thiaré pulled it off. And for a guy who has battled with injuries this year, I think he's been really productive when he's been able to stay on the field. I mean, forever he's going to be a folk hero now in Atlanta because of this, because that is one of the craziest, wildest, strangest goals that anybody who was there, anybody who's seen it will ever see and will probably never see again.
And I'll keep my fingers crossed that nobody was like the England fans that got caught on camera leaving the game early.
Yeah. I've been laughing about that one all day.
Well, and I feel bad for the Atlanta United fans that maybe tried to hit the martyr a little early because they would have missed a moment of magic as well.
Yep. No, I'm sure there were some of them, but I haven't seen that video yet. I was definitely enjoying the England fans like, oh, wow. Okay, we better try to go back in.
Well, since Jason is taking some hits at my English side, it may well be time to wrap up today's MLS Six Pack. We finished this game with both England and US still alive.
Hey, I don't know.
Will they be alive by the time that we finish recording? Who knows? So cheers for listening to the MLS Six Pack. We will be back next Monday with more.
Don't forget to recycle, folks.